The last time I went trick-or-treating was the year I turned 13. And it's a night that still haunts me. My dad usually came along on Halloween, even though he thought the whole thing was silly. But that year, he had to work a double shift and told me I could go out as long as I met up with some friends. The thing is, I didn't really have many friends at the time. I didn't tell my dad that. I just said I'd meet up with someone. But I went alone. That year, vampires were all the rage. Every kid had plastic fangs and a cape, doing those corny Dracula voices. But I wanted to stand out, so I dressed up as a werewolf, my favorite monster. My dad went all out on the costume, full-body fur, a detailed mask, the works. I was sure this would be a night to remember. I had no idea how right I was. After Dad left for work, I mapped out my route. I knew the best candy was on Stephenson Road, full-sized bars. It was a 20-minute walk from my neighborhood, but I figured if I left early and kept track of time, I'd make it back by 10 o'clock for my dad's check-in call. I had no idea that decision would change everything. The night air was crisp as I started trick-or-treating. Parents chased after kids on sugar highs, and older siblings were pulling their usual candy trades, trying to swap raisins for chocolate. I loved every second of it. By 8 o'clock, my pillowcase bag was half full, and I was debating whether to hit Stephenson Road or head home. The thought that this might be my last year made the decision for me. I had to go. When I reached Stephenson Road, it was everything I'd hoped for. Every house gave out full-sized candy bars, 2 at a time. My bag filled quickly. A few parents asked if I was alone, and I lied, saying my dad was waiting in his truck. I didn't want anyone tagging along or cutting my night short. By 9 o'clock, houses were starting to turn off their porch lights, and the walk back felt eerie. A cold wind blew, making me uneasy. I told myself it was just the chill in the air, but the silence on that dark road set my nerves on edge. Then I heard it. Halloween music, faint but distinct. Just ahead, I saw the glow of a porch light and a house decorated with lights and creepy props. The house hadn't been there earlier, I was sure of it. But I figured maybe the owners had been late setting up. An old man on the porch waved me over with a smile, holding a bowl of candy. He seemed friendly, just an old guy in a pumpkin-colored sweater. It was 9:24, and I figured one more stop wouldn't hurt. I greeted him with a cheerful trick or treat. He smiled warmly and complimented my costume, saying it had been a while since he'd seen a werewolf. But when he reached for his bowl, he frowned. "Out of candy already?" he muttered. "Why don't you come inside while I grab some more?" Looking back, I know how foolish it was to accept, but I was a kid, and he seemed kind. I stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind me. The house was cluttered but not strange. The old man disappeared into another room, saying he'd be right back. As I waited, a metallic scent filled the air. It reminded me of pennies. Then I heard the man call out from the other room, asking for help finding his cane. I stood up, and the smell of copper grew stronger. My heart raced as I followed his voice down the hall. When I stepped into the room, I froze. My watch still read 9:24 p.m. And the floor, oh God, the floor was covered in blood. I looked up and saw bodies hanging from hooks on the ceiling. Children, teenagers, adults. Their flesh was torn, some missing eyes, others with bite marks. Blood dripped onto the floor in sickening puddles. I felt paralyzed, my stomach churning, too scared to even scream. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see the old man, his face smeared with blood, flesh between his teeth, and eyes black as coal. His grip tightened as his mouth stretched impossibly wide. Just as I thought it was over, a voice yelled, "Run!" One of the bodies, still barely alive, was thrashing against the hooks, trying to free himself. His agonizing cry distracted the old man just long enough for me to break free. I bolted for the door, but the man grabbed my leg. In a panic, I kicked him hard in the eye, and he let go. I ran without looking back until I reached my driveway. My dad was outside, getting ready to search for me. When I saw him, I collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He stripped off my blood-soaked costume and treated a scratch on my leg. I told him everything, and he called the police. The cops searched all night, but they found nothing. The house and the man had vanished. The next day, they brushed it off as a prank. My dad never doubted me, though. For years, he drove up and down that road searching for the house, but it never appeared again. Even now, I think about that night, the man who saved me, the monster in disguise, and the horrors inside that house. I wonder if it only comes out on Halloween. If you ever see a house like that on a dark road, don't stop. Just run. If you like the story, please follow, like, share, and subscribe.